Deep beneath the suffocating green canopy of the Central American rainforest lies one of the most intellectually sophisticated and enigmatic civilizations in human history. For centuries, the dense jungle across modern-day southern Mexico, Guatemala, Belize, and western Honduras swallowed towering limestone pyramids, vast paved plazas, and thousands of intricately carved monuments. While Western historiography long centered its gaze on the fertile river valleys of the Nile, the Tigris, and the Euphrates, Mesoamerica forged a completely indigenous urban and intellectual revolution in total isolation from the Old World. Here, in a rugged landscape devoid of beasts of burden, the metal wheel or iron metallurgy, the ancient Maya engineered monumental stone metropolises, pioneered an advanced positional mathematics utilizing the concept of true zero, mapped celestial cycles with breathtaking accuracy, and developed the only fully phonetically readable writing system in the pre-Columbian Americas. To understand the rise of the Maya, one must first comprehend the geography and the cultural bedrock of Mesoamerica. This dynamic ecological theater spans from the volcanic highlands of southern Guatemala and Chiapas, rich in obsidian, jade, and quetzal plumes, down to the low-lying karst plateau of the northern Yucatan Peninsula. In the northern lowlands, surface rivers are virtually non-existent. The earth is a porous limestone shelf perforated by natural sinkholes known as cenotes, which served as the sole sources of life-giving fresh water and sacred conduits to the underworld. In the southern lowlands of the Petén Basin, dense seasonal tropical forests alternate between torrential monsoon deluges and punishing dry seasons. Survival in this unforgiving environment required an intimate, almost obsessive relationship with the seasons, soil hydrology, and the precise mechanical movements of the sun, moon, and planets. Yet the Maya did not construct their world from an absolute cultural void. Long before the first great Maya cities rose above the jungle canopy, the Olmec civilization flourished along the sweltering Gulf Coast of Veracruz and Tabasco between 1500 and 400 BCE. Often referred to by historians as the mother culture, or more accurately, a vital sister culture of Mesoamerica, the Olmecs laid the foundational architecture of Mesoamerican religious thought, urban planning, and ritual practice. They were master sculptors who quarried massive basalt boulders from distant volcanic fields, hauling them dozens of miles across swamps without draft animals to fashion the iconic colossal Olmec heads. The Olmecs introduced monumental earthen mound pyramids, established the sacred ritual of the rubber ball game, venerated a pantheon of hybrid supernatural entities like the were-jaguar and the feathered serpent, and devised early forms of symbolic iconography. Crucially, late Olmec-related sites such as Tres Zapotes yield some of the earliest documented long-count calendar dates in Mesoamerica, predating the classic Maya apex. The Olmecs forged extensive trade networks across hundreds of miles, distributing obsidian tools, serpentine, and jade throughout the region. As early Proto-Maya groups interacted with these Gulf Coast networks, they absorbed, reinterpreted, and ultimately elevated these foundational ideas into an entirely new cultural paradigm. If you appreciate deep, meticulously researched historical documentaries that explore the complexities of ancient civilizations without cutting corners, take a brief moment right now to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you do not miss any part of this multi-part Maya series. By approximately 1000 BCE, during the early and middle Preclassic periods, nomadic and semi-nomadic groups throughout the Maya lowlands transitioned rapidly into permanent agrarian settlements. Recent airborne laser scanning, or LiDAR technology, has shattered the long-held archaeological belief that this transition was slow and primitive. In Tabasco, at the recently uncovered site of Aguada Phoenix, archaeologists discovered an artificial clay and earth plateau measuring nearly a mile in length and rising 30 to 50 feet above the surrounding plain, dating back to 1000 BCE. This colossal construction required millions of cubic meters of earthwork and an unprecedented level of collective communal labor, predating the rise of rigid dynastic hierarchies. It demonstrated that monumental community-driven architecture in the Maya world emerged far earlier than previously imagined. As settled life solidified, Maya agricultural engineering transformed the landscape. Rather than relying solely on simple slash-and-burn horticulture, Maya engineers reshaped their terrain on a regional scale. In the dry lowlands, they chiseled out underground limestone cisterns called chultuns to capture and preserve rainwater through months of drought. In the marshy river valleys, they dug expansive networks of drainage canals and piled rich organic silt onto raised agricultural plots, creating nutrient-dense fields capable of yielding multiple harvests of maize, beans, squash, chili peppers, and cacao every year. Cacao was not merely a dietary staple, but an elite luxury and a standardized currency traded across Mesoamerica, while maize sat at the center of their spiritual universe, viewed as the literal divine substance from which the gods fashioned human flesh. The Middle and Late Preclassic periods, spanning roughly 800 BCE to 250 CE, witnessed an architectural and ideological explosion. Deep in the heart of the Petén jungle, cities like Nakbe and the colossal metropolis of El Mirador grew to staggering proportions. El Mirador was a true pre-Columbian supercity, home to tens of thousands of inhabitants centuries before the birth of the classic Maya centers. At its architectural core stands the La Danta Pyramid Complex, one of the most massive human-made structures on Earth by total volume, containing an estimated 2.8 million cubic meters of material. The builders of El Mirador perfected the triadic architectural arrangement, in which a dominant central pyramid is flanked by two smaller inward-facing temples on a shared elevated platform, embodying cosmic triangles and the ancestral hearthstones of creation. To unify their expansive urban sprawl and connect satellite cities, the Preclassic Maya constructed raised limestone causeways known as Sacbeob, meaning white roads. These elevated stone highways, coated in brilliant white lime plaster, spanned straight as an arrow across miles of swampy jungle, facilitating rapid military troop movements, elite ritual processions, and high-volume trade. The sheer administrative organization required to quarry, transport, align, and maintain these megalithic structures revealed that complex state-level political organization had taken root in the Maya lowlands long before the Classic period. Alongside this monumental urban boom came the crystallization of divine kingship, known conceptually as the institution of the Kuhul Ajah, or Holy Lord. The Maya king was not simply a secular ruler or military commander. He was an indispensable cosmic axis, a living axis mundi, who stood at the threshold between the terrestrial realm, the 13 layers of the heavens, and the watery 9-layered underworld of Xibalba. The survival of the cosmos depended directly on the king's ability to perform precise astronomical rituals, dance in the attire of patron deities, and offer his own sacred blood drawn from his tongue, ears, and genitals with stingray spines and obsidian blades to feed the cosmic order and ensure rainfall and agricultural renewal.
The ideological depth of this pre-classic worldview was dramatically confirmed in 2001 at the remote Guatemalan site of San Bartolo. There, inside a buried room known as the Pinturas Sub-1 chamber, archaeologist William Saturno discovered perfectly preserved, vibrant polychrome murals dating to approximately 100 BCE. Painted with extraordinary draftsmanship, the San Bartolo murals illustrate the mythic cycle of the maize god and the sacrificial coronation of a divine king, demonstrating that the complex theological and mythological canon of the Maya was fully formed centuries earlier than modern scholars had once assumed. Accompanying these murals were early Maya hieroglyphic texts, proving that a sophisticated, phonetically versatile scribal tradition was already functioning in early urban centers. At the same time, astronomical observation began to dictate the physical alignment of entire city centers. Specialized architectural arrangements known as E-groups, named after the prototypical structure Group E at Waxatun, were constructed across the lowlands. An E-group consists of a western observation pyramid facing an elongated eastern platform supporting three smaller temples. When viewed from the summit of the western pyramid, the sun rises precisely over the central eastern temple on the equinoxes and directly over the northern and southern temples on the summer and winter solstices. These horizon markers transformed civic centers into colossal stone clocks, permanently anchoring human society to the unyielding rhythms of the cosmos. Yet, despite this extraordinary early flourish, the late Preclassic era was not immune to systemic instability. Around 150 to 250 CE, a wave of societal disruptions, often termed the Preclassic collapse, led to the sudden abandonment or decline of monumental early giants like El Mirador and Cerros. Prolonged regional droughts, deforestation from the relentless burning of limestone to make lime plaster, and escalating interpolity warfare likely compromised the fragile ecological equilibrium of these pioneering megacities. However, the fall of the Preclassic giants did not signal the death of Maya civilization. Rather, it was a pivotal metamorphosis. The survivors migrated, refined their institutions, and laid the direct groundwork for the vibrant, fiercely competitive city-states of the Classic period. Further to the west, in the high central basin of Mexico, the immense enigmatic metropolis of Teotihuacan was already rising into a hyper-militarized commercial empire that would soon cast a long shadow across the entire Maya world. The stage was now set for the dawn of the classic Maya era, an epic defined by soaring rainforest citadels, intricate dynastic wars, towering inscribed stelae, and unprecedented intellectual mastery. By the middle of the 3rd century CE, the political and cultural landscape of the Maya world had shifted dramatically into what archaeologists designate as the Classic period. The colossal, hyper-centralized megacenters of the Preclassic era had fractured into a kaleidoscopic, highly competitive geopolitical quilt of autonomous city-states. This was not a unified, monolithic empire governed from a single capital, but rather a dynamic world of fiercely independent kingdoms, structurally reminiscent of classical ancient Greece or the warring city-states of Renaissance Italy. Each major urban center was anchored by its own dynastic royal house, known as an ajawil, defined by its unique emblem glyph and surrounded by complex tiers of subsidiary lords, sprawling residential suburbs, and intensively managed agricultural hinterlands. Across the southern lowlands, ancient cities such as Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, and Palenque rose to prominence, embarking on centuries of dazzling architectural, ritual, and military expansion. At the geographic heart of the Petén Basin lay Tikal, known anciently as Yakmutal, strategically positioned atop a broad limestone ridge that rose above surrounding seasonal swamps. Tikal controlled vital overland trade arteries running east to west across the base of the Yucatan Peninsula. From its earliest founding, Tikal's dynastic rulers erected towering funerary pyramids over ancestral tombs, carving elaborate stone stelae that paired stylized portraits of kings with precise hieroglyphic chronicles of their reigns.
Yet during the late 4th century CE, an extraordinary event occurred that forever altered the trajectory of Tikal and reverberated across the entirety of the Maya lowlands: the arrival of foreigners from the distant highlands of central Mexico. Over 600 miles to the northwest, nestled in the high valley of Mexico, lay Teotihuacan, a massive, grid-planned commercial metropolis of over 100,000 people, distinct in language, religion, and urban design from anything seen in the Maya jungle. Teotihuacan possessed an aggressive state-level military apparatus and exercised a monopoly over the prized green obsidian of Pachuca. On January 16, 378 CE, as recorded on Tikal's Stela 31 and the Marcador monument, a mysterious war leader named Siach Kak, whose name translates to "fire is born," arrived in Tikal. In Maya hieroglyphic texts, his arrival is termed the Entrada. On the exact day Siach Kak entered the city, Tikal's long-reigning native monarch, Chak Tak Ichak, also known as Great Jaguar Paw, died, or as the stone inscriptions poetically record, entered the water. The Entrada was not merely a diplomatic exchange, it was a profound political and military restructuring. Siach Kak acted as an imperial regent, representing a supreme foreign warlord named Spear Thrower Owl, who appears to have been the ruler of Teotihuacan itself. Within a year, Spear Thrower Owl's young son was installed onto the throne of Tikal under the royal name Yax Nun Ahin I. This newly established foreign-backed dynasty radically shaped Tikal's art, military gear, and religious rituals. Maya kings began portraying themselves wearing Central Mexican balloon headdresses, carrying rectangular shields, hurling Central Mexican atlat dart throwers, and invoking the foreign rain and storm deity Tlaloc alongside their native pantheon. Siach Kak did not stop at Tikal. He marched across the lowlands, reorganizing political lineages, subduing regional centers like Uaxatan and Rio Azul, and establishing subordinate client states allied directly to the new imperial order. The influence of this highland intervention rippled as far south as the Motagua River Valley in modern-day western Honduras, where the great southern metropolis of Copan was born. In 426 CE, a charismatic military figure named Kinich Yax Kuk Mo, meaning sun-eyed, resplendent Quetzal Macaw, arrived in Copan to establish a dynastic lineage that would endure for 4 centuries. Modern bioarchaeological analysis of his skeletal remains, recovered from deep inside the Hunal tomb at Copan, reveals that strontium isotope levels in his teeth match the Tikal region, while his architectural offerings, bone trauma, and artistic portraits bear unmistakable hallmarks of Teotihuacan. Copan became the economic jewel of the southeast, monopolizing the regional trade of Motagua jade and riverine commerce, while blending central Mexican prestige with distinct Maya aesthetic brilliance. Yet Tikal's ascendancy was not met with passive submission by the rest of the Maya world. To the north, deep in the forests of Campeche, another colossal superpower was mobilizing, the Kingdom of Canul, famously known to history as the Snake Dynasty. Operating first from the northern site of Xibalba and later establishing their supreme capital at Calakmul, the Snake Kings developed a grand, continent-scale geopolitical strategy designed to counterbalance and ultimately crush Tikal's imperial ambitions. Calakmul was an immense metropolis, anchored by Structure 2, a gargantuan limestone pyramid whose base covers more than 5 acres. Rather than relying solely on direct territorial annexation, the Snake Kings operated like master chess players, weaving an intricate network of military alliances, dynastic marriages, and subordinate client kingdoms that completely encircled Tikal. The geopolitical struggle between Tikal and Calakmul has frequently been characterized by historians and epigraphers as a Mesoamerican Cold War. The Snake Kings methodically courted cities on Tikal's immediate borders, including Naranjo to the east, El Peru Huaca to the west, and Calakmul in the Maya Mountains of Belize. Under the visionary leadership of Calakmul's greatest monarch, Uknum Chen II, also known as Uknum the Great, the Kanul alliance tightened its noose. In 562 CE, the Snake dynasty orchestrated a coordinated military strike against Tikal, utilizing the armies of allied Calakmul in what hieroglyphic texts describe as a devastating Star War event, a cataclysmic conflict strategically timed to coincide with distinct configurations of the planet Venus. Tikal suffered a catastrophic defeat. Its ruling king, Wakchan Kawil, was captured and ritually sacrificed. Its monuments were systematically defaced or smashed, and the city plunged into a deep, century-long geopolitical dark age, known to archaeologists as the Tikal hiatus. Between 562 and 692 CE, Tikal erected almost no carved stelae or monumental public works. Its prestige was shattered, and the Snake dynasty ruled supreme over the Maya lowlands, arbitrating disputes between lesser city-states, presiding over royal accessions from Tabasco to Honduras, and demanding immense tributes of jade, feathers, textiles, and cacao. While the lowlands were consumed by the Titan clash between Tikal and Calakmul, distinct cultural and architectural masterworks flowered along the western frontier. In the lush, waterfall-laced foothills of Chiapas, overlooking the coastal plains of the Gulf of Mexico, rose the exquisite city of Palenque, known anciently as La Camha, or Big Water. Palenque's architecture was fundamentally different from the heavy, megalithic masses of Petén. Here, Maya architects engineered lightweight, graceful structures with delicate mansard roofs, open interior galleries, multi-story observation towers, and an extraordinarily complex subterranean hydraulic system featuring pressurized aqueducts that channeled mountain streams beneath paved royal plazas.
Palenque's golden age was forged under the legendary reign of Kinich Janab Pakal I, widely known as Pakal the Great. Ascending the throne in 615 CE at the tender age of 12, after Palenque had been devastated by a series of brutal military invasions by the Snake Kingdom, Pakal rebuilt the city from its ashes during a remarkable 68-year reign. He transformed Palenque into an architectural jewel and commissioned the Temple of the Inscriptions, a soaring funerary pyramid designed specifically to house his own final resting place. Deep within the heart of the pyramid, sealed beneath an immense limestone slab, archaeologists in 1952 discovered Pakal's intact burial chamber, containing his magnificent jade mosaic death mask and a monumental carved sarcophagus lid that remains one of the greatest masterpieces of ancient global art. Meanwhile, along the southeastern periphery in Copan, Maya culture reached the absolute zenith of its three-dimensional sculptural expression. Unlike the flat, low-relief stelae of the Petén, the sculptors of Copan worked with soft volcanic tuff, allowing them to carve astonishing, almost fully three-dimensional, high-relief portraits of their rulers, adorned in hyper-detailed cosmic regalia. The 13th ruler of Copan, Waxaclajun Uba Kawil, known famously as 18 Rabbit, turned the city into an open-air sacred theater. He commissioned the Great Plaza with its forest of intricately carved stone stelae and began construction of the world-renowned Hieroglyphic Stairway. Spanning 63 stone steps and comprising over 2,000 individual glyph blocks, the Hieroglyphic Stairway stands today as the single longest contiguous carved text in the pre-Columbian Americas, recounting the unbroken heroic genealogy of Copan's sacred dynastic founders. For much of the early 20th century, pioneering Western Mayanists envisioned these classic Maya cities as peaceful, idyllic ceremonial centers inhabited by gentle stargazers and philosophical priests who rarely engaged in warfare. Decades of epigraphic breakthroughs, decipherment of war glyphs, and advanced archaeological excavations have utterly demolished this romanticized myth.
Classic Maya society was intensely militaristic and fiercely contested. Warfare was institutionalized and woven directly into the cosmic fabric of elite identity. Elite warriors marched into battle armed with flint and obsidian-tipped lances, curved throwing clubs, and heavy cotton armor soaked in salt water to harden the weave, marching behind towering wooden effigies of their city's patron gods. Maya military terminology separated warfare into distinct strategic categories. Low-intensity raids, known as chuck or axe events, were designed to capture high-ranking enemy nobles, princes, and rival kings. Capturing an opposing lord alive brought immense prestige to the victor, and the captured elites were paraded in public humiliation before being ritually sacrificed through decapitation or heart excision during cosmic calendar anniversaries. Higher-order conflicts, such as the aforementioned Star Wars or Hubi destruction events, aimed to total regime change, the sacking of sacred temple shrines, the smashing of dynastic stelae, and a forced subjugation of foreign populations into tribute-paying vassals. Yet the splendor of Maya royal courts, with their elaborate feather robes, jade ear flares, and dynastic rivalries, rested entirely upon the backs of an immense, highly organized non-elite population. Beneath the royal Ahau and the aristocratic Almehenab nobility lay a vast, vibrant socio-economic engine of commoners, agricultural laborers, stonemasons, potters, weavers, and merchant guilds known as polom. Maya cities were not compact, stone-bound enclosures, but rather expansive, low-density agrarian urban networks where urban centers blended seamlessly into vast residential compounds, kitchen gardens, and managed orchard forests. Excavations in residential sectors reveal that Maya markets were bustling hubs of regional economic trade. In plazas lined with perishable wooden stalls, commoners and visiting traders bartered salt, dried fish from the coasts, quetzal feathers, dried chili peppers, grinding stones carved from volcanic basalt, intricately painted polychrome ceramic vessels, and lengths of woven cotton cloth. Standardized media of exchange, including cacao beans, high-grade greenstone beads, and copper bells from later trade networks, functioned alongside direct bartering systems. The sheer logistical mastery required to feed, organize, and govern cities with populations reaching 50 to 100,000 inhabitants without modern draft animals or metal machinery remains an astounding testament to indigenous Mesoamerican engineering. By the late 7th century CE, the fragile geopolitical balance of the classic Maya world was preparing for another seismic collision. Tikal was quietly gathering its strength to break the Canopy stranglehold and reclaim its imperial supremacy. But behind the grandeur of these sprawling rainforest kingdoms, behind the clash of armies and the soaring limestone temples, operated an even more profound intellectual engine, an astonishingly complex mathematical and astronomical framework that governed the construction of every building, the timing of every war, and the philosophical soul of every Maya individual. To step into the intellectual world of the ancient Maya is to encounter a civilization profoundly, almost cosmically, consumed by the nature of time. Where modern Western philosophy often views time as an abstract, detached metric, a mechanical arrow flying infinitely in a straight line, the Maya experienced time as a vibrant, living, cyclical reality. To the Maya, temporal cycles were not merely human constructs to organize labor or track seasons. They were divine, living entities carried through the cosmos on the backs of gods who took turns bearing the sacred burdens of days, months, and millennia. If a benevolent deity carried the day, peace and abundance followed. If a wrathful or chaotic god assumed the burden, drought, pestilence, and catastrophic war threatened the world. Deciphering, calculating, and ritually placating these temporal forces required a mathematical apparatus of astonishing elegance and precision. At the very core of this intellectual architecture was a base 20 vigesimal mathematical system. While modern computing relies on base 2 binary and global daily commerce operates on the Arabic base 10 decimal framework, the Maya developed a vigesimal system derived directly from the complete human body, 10 fingers and 10 toes. This system was remarkably intuitive and visually concise, relying on only 3 core graphical symbols to record any number from 1 to infinity. A single dot represented the quantity of 1, a straight horizontal bar represented 5, and a stylized depiction of a bivalve seashell, an open hand, or a zero glyph, represented the concept of completion and nothingness, known linguistically as me. The Maya invention and conceptual mastery of zero stands as one of the towering intellectual breakthroughs in global human history. Centuries before Western Europe discarded cumbersome Roman numerals in favor of the Hindu-Arabic positional system, Mesoamerican mathematicians were already routinely utilizing a fully operational placeholder, an absolute numerical zero. While the Babylonians possessed a rudimentary zero placeholder, and ancient Indian mathematicians independently formalized the concept around the 5th century CE, the Maya had already carved explicit mathematical zero glyphs into their stone monuments and codices as early as the 1st century BCE. This was not simply an empty space on a ledger, but a dynamic, operational zero that allowed for vertical, positional place-value arithmetic. Working upward from bottom to top, the lowest tier represented single units, the second tier represented multiples of 20, the third tier recorded multiples of 400, the fourth recorded 8,000, and so on into millions. Armed with this versatile vigesimal system, Maya astronomer priests constructed the most intricate multi-tiered calendar apparatus ever devised in antiquity. This was not a single standalone calendar, but a complex interlocking mechanism of wheels within wheels, meshing distinct cycles of sacred, solar, and deep linear time into a single unified temporal matrix. The first of these cycles, and the spiritual heartbeat of Mesoamerican life, was the sacred 260-day almanac known as the Tzolk'in. The Tzolk'in operates through the permutation of 2 distinct, overlapping gears, a sequence of 13 numbered coefficients meshing with 20 unique named day signs, ranging from Imix, the primordial water lily, to Ahau, the day of the sacred Lord.
The mathematical origin of this 260-day cycle remains a subject of rich academic discussion among Mayanists. Many anthropologists point to the human gestational period, which averages roughly 260 days from the first missed menstruation to birth, inextricably linking the sacred calendar to the creation of human life. Others emphasize its agricultural alignment with the cycle of lowland maize cultivation, or its correspondence to the duration of visible planetary cycles and solar zenith passages in southern Mesoamerican latitudes. Regardless of its initial origin, the Tzolk'in was the supreme divinatory tool of Maya society. Specially trained day keepers, known in contemporary highland Maya communities as Kijab, interpreted the specific omen and energetic patron of every individual's birth date, determining their spiritual destiny, their medical treatments, and the most auspicious days for agricultural planting, royal weddings, and military campaigns. Running parallel to this 260-day sacred cycle was the Hab, the 365-day solar calendar that governed the mundane agricultural, civic, and tax collection cycles of Maya society. The Hab was divided into 18 individual months called winals, each containing exactly 20 days, totaling 360 days. The remaining 5 days of the solar year were grouped into a distinct, ominous liminal period known as the Wayeb.
The Maya understood the astronomical duration of the tropical year with remarkable nuance, recognizing that the solar cycle drifted slightly beyond exactly 365 days. The 5 days of the Wayeb were viewed by the Maya as a terrifying temporal threshold where the cosmic fabric wore thin. During this period, the nameless, unlucky days lacked divine patron guardians, allowing destructive entities and spectral forces from the underworld to seep freely into the human realm. Communities took radical protective measures. Routine domestic labor ceased. Fasting and sexual abstinence were enforced. Homes remained unswept and dark. Hearth fires were deliberately extinguished, and special defensive rituals were performed by elites and priests to hold chaos at bay until the new year could be safely ignited. When the 260-day sacred Zōkin and the 365-day civic Hab were calculated together, they interlocked like two giant mechanical gears to form the grand 52-year cycle known to modern archaeologists as the calendar round. Mathematically, because 260 and 365 share a greatest common divisor of 5, it requires exactly 18,980 unique days, or 52 solar years, for any specific day combination, such as 4 Ahau, 8 Kumku, to repeat itself. For common individuals living within the Maya world, the calendar round provided a complete chronological framework for an entire human lifetime. Every 52 years, the cycle reset, prompting grand Mesoamerican renewal ceremonies, the extinguishing and rekindling of sacred fires, and the ceremonial rebuilding or expansion of royal temples. However, while a 52-year repeating cycle was sufficient for domestic life and short-term administration, it presented a severe historical limitation for ambitious dynastic rulers. A king wishing to record the triumphs of his great-great-grandfather or link his legitimate accession to a mythic ancestor 5 centuries in the past could not rely on a repeating cycle that restarted every 52 years. To solve this chronological dilemma, the Maya perfected the long count, a continuous, non-repeating linear calendar system capable of pinpointing any historical or cosmological event with absolute chronological precision from an anchor point set deep in antiquity. The long count operated by counting the cumulative number of days that had elapsed from a standardized mythological creation date. The base unit was the single day, termed a kin. 20 kins constituted a 20-day month, or winal. 18 winals formed a tun, a 360-day unit that approximated the solar year while maintaining the elegant base 20 vigesimal structure. 20 tuns created a katun, spanning 7,200 days, or approximately 19.7 years, an epical milestone of massive political and ritual significance.
Finally, 20 Katuns equaled a Baktun, an immense cosmic cycle of 144,000 days, or roughly 394 solar years. When written on monumental stone stelae, a long count date appeared as 5 vertical numerical coefficients separated by glyphs recording the exact number of Baktuns, Katuns, Tuns, Winals, and Kins elapsed since the dawn of the current world. Through astronomical cross-referencing, colonial chronicles, and radiocarbon verification, most notably codified in the modern Goodman-Martinez-Thompson correlation, scholars established that the starting anchor date of the current Maya long count calendar corresponds to August 11, 3114 BCE. In the Mayan hieroglyphic script, this primordial date is written as 13.0.0.0.0, 4 Ahau, 8 Kumku.
According to Mesoamerican cosmological narratives preserved on monumental inscriptions and later compiled in the sacred Quiche Maya epic, the Popol Vuh, this date marked the conclusion of a previous imperfect era and the dawn of the current creation. On this day, the creator gods raised the celestial sky away from the primeval sea, bound the cosmic cords, and planted the three sacred hearthstones of creation, establishing the physical and metaphysical order of the universe. The monumental scale of the long count cycle captured global public imagination in the early 21st century, giving rise to the widespread modern myth that the ancient Maya had predicted an apocalyptic end of the world on December 21, 2012. From an authentic epigraphic and historical perspective, this apocalyptic interpretation was entirely baseless. December 21, 2012 marked nothing more than the mathematical completion of the 13th Baktun, the rollover of a major cosmic odometer from 12.19.19.17.19 back to a renewed 13.0.0.0.0. Inscriptions from sites like Tortuguero in Tabasco and La Corona in Guatemala indicate that ancient scribes viewed this transition not as a catastrophic annihilation, but as a momentous occasion of cosmic renewal and the ritual descent of patron deities. In fact, Maya temporal calculations were never limited to the 13th Baktun. In the grand hieroglyphic texts carved on Stela 1 at the ancient city of Koba, Maya scribes systematically projected mathematical calculations upward into astronomical tiers beyond the Baktun, the Pictun, the Kalabtun, the Kinshiltun, and the Alautun, units of time spanning billions, trillions, and octillions of years into both the distant past and into the unimaginable future. This was a civilization that conceptualized deep time on almost modern cosmological scale, viewing human history as an intimate rhythmic ripple within an eternal divine cosmic matrix. For the kings and queens of the classic period, this absolute mastery of mathematical time was the ultimate instrument of political legitimacy and imperial propaganda. Every 20 years, at the close of each sacred Katun, kings throughout the lowlands commissioned monumental stone stelae and altars to celebrate the completion of the cycle. Rulers deliberately scheduled their military conquests, royal coronations, and monumental building dedications to align with auspicious astronomical alignments and the mythic anniversaries of the gods. By anchoring their temporal deeds to the eternal mechanics of the heavens, Mayan monarchs declared to their subjects and their rivals that their right to rule was not merely a terrestrial accident, but an unshakable decree written into the mathematics of the cosmos. Yet to calculate time with such profound exactitude, the Maya required more than abstract mathematical formulas. They required an empirical, observational mastery of the night sky. In the absence of glass lenses, optical telescopes, or metal instruments, Maya skywatchers tracked the delicate paths of the planets and stars through physical architecture, developing an astronomical science whose accuracy rivaled and often surpassed anything achieved in contemporary Europe.
To the ancient Maya, the night sky was neither an inert expanse of empty space nor a random collection of distant stars. It was a vast illuminated canvas across which gods, ancestral spirits, and cosmic monsters enacted the eternal dramas of life, death, and resurrection. Every planetary orbit, stellar rising, and shadow cast across a limestone courtyard was interpreted as a direct revelation of divine will. Without the aid of optical glass, metallic astrolabes, or mechanical clocks, the astronomer priests of the Maya world developed an observational science so rigorously empirical and mathematically precise that their calculations of celestial cycles rivaled and in many respects surpassed those of their contemporaries in Europe, Asia, and the Mediterranean. Operating from elevated temple pyramids that cleared the dense canopy of the rainforest, Maya skywatchers tracked the heavens using remarkably ingenious naked-eye observational techniques.
They established precise sight lines across the natural and built landscape, sighting celestial bodies through pairs of crossed wooden sticks set within the dark, narrow door frames of specialized summit chambers. By measuring the rising and setting points of planets against distant mountain ridges, artificial stone markers, and purposefully aligned temple masonry, generations of dedicated scribes compiled centuries of empirical data. These continuous observations were transcribed into accordion-folded bark paper codices, transforming raw celestial observation into predictive astronomical tables, capable of projecting planetary positions centuries into the future. Among all the wandering celestial bodies, none held a more terrifying and supreme importance in the Maya cosmos than the planet Venus, known anciently as Chak-Ek, the Great Star. While modern Western culture associates Venus with love and beauty through its Greco-Roman lens, the Maya viewed Venus as a fiercely masculine, volatile, and warlike deity associated with fire, thunder, and violent upheaval. The celestial movement of Venus was observed with rigorous mathematical precision and deep spiritual dread. The core of this knowledge survives today in the surviving pages of the Dresden Codex, a post-classic Maya bark paper manuscript preserved in Germany. Pages 46 through 50 of the Dresden Codex contain the world-renowned Venus tables, a masterclass of ancient mathematical astronomy. The Maya calculated the synodic period of Venus, the time it takes the planet to return to the exact same position relative to the Sun as viewed from Earth, as precisely 584 days. Modern astronomical instruments measure this exact synodic average at 583.92 days. The Maya recognized that this 584-day cycle was divided into 4 distinct phases: 236 days as the brilliant morning star rising before dawn, 90 days of invisibility during superior conjunction as it passed behind the sun, 250 days as the dazzling evening star shining at dusk, and 8 critical days of disappearance during inferior conjunction as it passed between the Earth and the sun. Furthermore, Maya mathematicians solved a major astronomical puzzle by discovering the harmonious resonance between the solar year and the orbit of Venus. They calculated that 5 synodic Venus cycles of 584 days equaled exactly 8 365-day solar years, both totaling precisely 2,920 days. Yet, Maya astronomers did not stop there. Recognizing that the true synodic cycle of Venus ran slightly shorter than 584 days by a fraction of an hour, they engineered an ingenious mathematical correction table within the Dresden Codex. Every few centuries, their scribes systematically dropped 4 or 8 days from their calculations, preventing their predictive almanacs from drifting out of alignment with the actual physical movements of the planet over millennia.
This mastery over the mechanics of Venus was far from an idle academic pursuit. It was a lethal instrument of statecraft and military strategy. The most dreaded moment in the Venus cycle was its heliacal rising, the exact morning the newborn morning star first re-emerged from the horizon after its 8-day disappearance during inferior conjunction. The Maya believed that the piercing, radiant rays of the newborn morning star carried potent cosmic poison, capable of blinding leaders, withering crops, and bringing pestilence. Kings and war chiefs systematically coordinated the launch of catastrophic military strikes, known in epigraphy as Star Wars, to coincide precisely with distinct stations of Venus. By aligning their military marches with the descent of the Great Star, Maya warlords believed they were channeling the supreme destructive fury of the cosmos directly onto their terrified adversaries. Beyond the martial terror of Venus, Maya astronomers conquered the complex rhythms of the moon and the frightening mystery of solar and lunar eclipses.
On pages 51 through 58 of the Dresden Codex lies a comprehensive lunar and eclipse prediction table. The Maya tracked the lunar synodic month from new moon to new moon, calculating it with astonishing accuracy at approximately 29.53059 days by grouping alternating months of 29 and 30 days into precise numerical clusters. By stacking these lunar intervals into cycles of 5 and 6 months, totaling 148 and 177 days, the Maya identified the precise nodal points where the orbital path of the Moon intersects the plane of the Earth's orbit around the Sun. This allowed them to construct a sophisticated warning system that accurately predicted the narrow windows during which solar and lunar eclipses could physically occur anywhere on Earth. To the general populace, an eclipse was a terrifying cosmic crisis in which the celestial sun or moon was violently devoured by a skeletal sky monster or giant serpent. The ability of royal priests to predict these terrifying events in advance and conduct the necessary sacrificial rituals to save the sun solidified the untouchable divine authority of the ruling dynasty. The daily journey of the sun was integrated directly into the monumental architecture of Maya urban planning. In tropical latitudes between the equator and the Tropic of Cancer, an astronomical phenomenon occurs twice a year known as the zenith passage, during which the sun reaches the exact vertical center of the sky at solar noon, causing vertical poles and standing humans to cast absolutely no shadow. The Maya observed this solar milestone with sacred veneration, utilizing underground zenith observation tubes, vertical shafts cut directly through the roofs of subterranean masonry chambers to allow a concentrated beam of vertical sunlight to illuminate subterranean altars at the precise minute of the zenith passage, marking the official opening of the agricultural planting season. This deliberate integration of astronomical sightlines into monumental architecture, known to modern science as Archaeoastronomy, reaches its most stunning manifestations in the northern cities of the Yucatan Peninsula. At Chichen Itza, the massive central pyramid known as El Castillo, or the Temple of Kukulkan, serves as a monumental stone calendar. The pyramid features 4 staircases of 91 steps each, which when combined with the shared top platform total 365 steps, one for each day of the solar year. Furthermore, on the spring and autumn equinoxes, the setting sun casts a series of alternating triangular shadows along the balustrade of the northern staircase, creating the vivid optical illusion of a giant feathered serpent slithering down the side of the pyramid to fertilize the earth below.
A short distance away from El Castillo stands El Caracol, an architectural wonder functioning as a specialized astronomical observatory. Named for the spiral staircase winding through its cylindrical core, El Caracol features narrow viewing slits in its upper masonry walls that align flawlessly with 20 distinct astronomical events, including the extreme northern and southern horizon limits of the planet Venus, the equinox sunsets, and the summer solstice sunrise. Similarly, at the Puc-style capital of Uxmal, the magnificent palace of the governor is deliberately skewed by 20 degrees away from the city's primary urban grid. This deliberate alignment shoots an unbroken sightline across nearly 4 miles of open savanna directly toward the distant pyramid of Nopat, pinpointing the precise spot where Venus reaches its southernmost excursion along the horizon every 8 years. When the Maya turned their eyes toward the deep expanse of the starry night, they perceived a celestial theater intimately linked to their sacred creation narratives. They did not see the Greek zodiac, but an indigenous pantheon of cosmic asterisms. The Milky Way was seen as the monumental Huacachan, the world tree or cosmic ceiba that anchored the universe, whose roots plunged into the underworld and whose branches cradled the highest heavens.
During other seasons of the year, the Milky Way was envisioned as the great cosmic canoe, steered by the paddler gods as they ferried the dead maize god across the celestial waters to the place of his miraculous rebirth. The dark dust clouds and stellar voids cutting through the center of the Milky Way, known today as the Great Rift, were understood by the Maya as the terrifying Xibalba Bay, the literal road to the underworld through which ancestral souls and sacrificial victims journeyed after death. Near this celestial highway, the three bright stars of the constellation Orion, Alnitak, Saiph, and Rigel, were identified as the three sacred hearthstones placed by the gods at the primordial creation of the universe in 3114 BCE, with the faint glow of the Orion Nebula at its center representing the sacred crackling cosmic smoke of the primordial first hearth fire. For a classic Maya monarch, possessing this advanced astronomical knowledge was the ultimate engine of political power and ideological control. By commissioning towering stone pyramids and grand palace complexes whose doorways and staircases were permanently locked in alignment with the stars, kings demonstrated that they lived in absolute harmony with the architecture of the universe. When an Ahau stepped out onto a temple terrace precisely as Venus breached the horizon, bathed in the exact solar shadow predicted by his scribes, the thousands of awestruck subjects gathered in the plaza below had no doubt that their sovereign was not merely an earthly ruler, but a living god who commanded the celestial machinery of the heavens. Yet the preservation and transmission of this profound astronomical knowledge, along with the detailed historical chronicles of dynasties, wars, and royal genealogies, required an equally brilliant system of graphic communication. To capture the full phonetic complexity of their spoken language and the sacred nuances of their cosmology, the Maya created the most sophisticated, visually magnificent, and intellectually challenging writing system ever invented in the ancient Western Hemisphere, a hieroglyphic script that would take modern scholars centuries to finally crack.
For centuries after the fall of the great lowland cities, the thousands of intricately carved glyphs covering Maya temples, stone stelae, and painted pottery remained a silent, baffling enigma. To the early Western explorers who hacked their way through the Central American jungle in the 18th and 19th centuries, these glyphs looked like surreal alien caricatures, monstrous human faces, predatory animal heads, twisted hands, and abstract geometric spirals crammed tightly into neat, rounded cartouches. Unlike the flowing alphabetical scripts of the Mediterranean or the linear cuneiform tablets of Mesopotamia, the Maya writing system was a visually stunning blend of high art and rigorous linguistic science. Today, epigraphers recognize it as the most sophisticated and complete writing system ever developed in the indigenous Americas. A logo-syllabic script capable of capturing every subtle inflection, poetic nuance, and grammatical complexity of the Maya language. At its structural core, the Maya script operated on a logo-syllabic framework, functionally similar to ancient Egyptian hieroglyphics and modern Japanese. The writing system consisted of hundreds of distinct signs divided into two primary categories: logograms, which were whole word signs representing specific concepts or morphemes, and syllabograms, which were purely phonetic signs representing open consonant-vowel combinations. For instance, the word for jaguar, balam, could be represented in multiple distinct ways depending on the aesthetic choice of the scribe. A writer could draw a single, highly detailed logogram of a jaguar's head, or they could construct the word phonetically using three separate syllabic signs, ba, la, and ma. In reading this phonetic combination, the Maya employed the linguistic principle of synharmony. The vowel of the final syllable was silent, dropping the terminal a to yield the spoken word balam.
Because scribes possessed immense artistic freedom, they frequently combined logograms and phonetic syllables into complex composite glyphs, attaching phonetic complements to ensure the reader did not misinterpret the word. A master scribe could choose from dozens of alternative signs to represent the exact same sound or concept, deliberately varying their spelling across a single monument so that no two glyph blocks looked identical. This turned every stone inscription into a unique, dazzling exhibition of calligraphic and sculptural virtuosity. Within Maya society, the individuals who mastered this formidable script belonged to the highest echelons of the aristocratic elite. Known as the Aj-Tsib, meaning he of the writing, and the Itzat, meaning the sage, scribes were often the younger sons and daughters of kings, members of the royal bloodline who underwent rigorous training in elite academies. Maya mythology celebrated the scribes as cosmic practitioners protected by patron deities, most notably the howler monkey gods and spider monkey gods, who were depicted on painted ceramic drinking vessels holding conch shell inkwells and fine-tipped brushes fashioned from animal hair and quills. The Aj-Tsib were not mere record keepers, they were historians, astronomers, theologians, and poets who possessed the exclusive power to bridge the earthly present with ancestral and divine memory. The scribes recorded their vast libraries of knowledge on long folding accordion-style books known as codices, made from the beaten inner bark of wild fig trees known as hun or amat, which were surfaced with a fine, brilliant coat of white lime plaster and painted in vibrant polychrome pigments. These folding manuscripts contained the entirety of Maya civilization, dynastic chronicles, tribute registries, legal codes, botanical and medical treaties, astronomical tables, and sacred mythological epics. Thousands of these priceless literary treasures once filled royal libraries across Mesoamerica, representing one of the greatest intellectual repositories in the ancient world.
Tragically, almost the entirety of this monumental literary heritage was systematically eradicated in one of the most catastrophic acts of cultural destruction in human history. In the 16th century, following the Spanish conquest of the Yucatan Peninsula, the Franciscan friar and later bishop Diego de Landa launched a brutal campaign to violently suppress indigenous religious practices. On July 12, 1562, in the central plaza of the Yucatec town of Mani, Landa conducted an infamous auto de fe. Convicting the local Maya population of secretly maintaining their ancient faith, Landa ordered the public burning of dozens of sacred bark paper codices, along with thousands of sculpted stone and wooden idols. As Landa himself callously recorded in his writings, the Maya felt the burning of their sacred books with extraordinary grief and sorrow, for their entire documented intellectual history was consumed by flames in a single afternoon. Out of the countless thousands of pre-Columbian Maya books that once existed, only 4 authentic pre-conquest bark paper codices survived the flames of the Spanish conquest to the modern era, each named after the modern cities in which they were eventually preserved: the Dresden Codex, the Madrid Codex, the Paris Codex, and the Maya Codex of Mexico, formerly known as the Grolier Codex. The Dresden Codex contains the pinnacle of Maya astronomical science, including the Venus and eclipse tables. The Madrid Codex preserves divinatory almanacs and agrarian rituals. The Paris Codex outlines Khatoon prophetic cycles and Mesoamerican zodiac constellations. And the Maya Codex of Mexico preserves a fragmentary Venus calendar. These 4 surviving manuscripts offered modern scholars a tantalizing, agonizing glimpse into the staggering intellectual depth of the lost Maya libraries. For more than a century following the initial rediscovery of Maya ruins, the decipherment of the remaining stone hieroglyphs was paralyzed by deeply entrenched academic dogmas.
The leading 20th-century British Mayanist, Sir J. Eric Thomson, held an almost dictatorial intellectual monopoly over the field. Thomson aggressively argued that Maya glyphs were not phonetic letters or syllables, but mystical, ideographic symbols representing abstract cosmic concepts, planetary deities, and temporal cycles. Under Thomson's romanticized view, the classic Maya were peaceful, philosophical priests who never recorded mundane human history, dynastic warfare, or the names of individual kings on their stone stelae. Because Thomson adamantly denied that the glyphs represented a phonetic spoken language, decipherment efforts ground to a virtual standstill for decades. The first major crack in this ideological fortress appeared in 1958, when the German-Mexican epigrapher Heinrich Berlin made a profound discovery. He identified a specific class of glyphs that appeared repeatedly at single archaeological sites but were absent or altered at others. These glyphs featured a distinct decorative framing known as a main sign, attopped with a specific royal prefix reading "cool," meaning divine or holy. Berlin coined the term emblem glyphs and correctly deduced that these signs represented the heraldic royal titles and kingdom names of specific city-states such as Tikal, Palenque, Capan, and Calakmul. For the first time, scholars realized that the stone inscriptions contained a detailed map of real, historical Mesoamerican political geography.
Shortly thereafter, in 1960, the brilliant Russian-American architectural scholar Tatiana Proskuryakov delivered the decisive intellectual breakthrough that completely dismantled Thomson's peaceful priest hypothesis. While methodically analyzing the dates and stylistic patterns on the stone stelae lining the plazas of Piedras Negras in Guatemala, Proskuryakov noticed a striking chronological pattern. She observed that the carved monuments were grouped in distinct architectural postures, with each cluster spanning a time frame never exceeding 64 years, the natural duration of a human lifespan. Proskuryakov identified recurring glyphic verbs associated with specific dates within each cluster, a distinct toothache glyph that always marked the beginning of a cluster, and an upended frog glyph that appeared several decades later. With piercing analytical precision, Proskuryakov proved that the toothache glyph recorded the royal accession of an earthly king to the throne, while the upended frog glyph marked the king's physical birth. The carved stone stelae of the classic Maya were not abstract cosmic poetry. They were the concrete dynastic histories of flesh and blood human monarchs, recording their births, their accessions, their military triumphs, and their deaths. While Proskuryakov proved what the inscriptions were talking about, the monumental task of actually reading the phonetic sounds of the script was unlocked far away in the Soviet Union. Behind the Iron Curtain, in the academic cloisters of Leningrad, a young linguist named Yuri Knorozov re-examined the colonial manuscript left behind by the very man who had burned the Maya libraries, Bishop Diego de Landa. In his 16th-century chronicle, Relación de las Cosas de Yucatán, Landa had included what he mistakenly believed was a Maya alphabet, having asked a surviving Maya noble to write the glyphic equivalents of Spanish letters like A, B, and C. For centuries, Western scholars dismissed Landa's alphabet as complete nonsense because they tried to match it letter for letter to an alphabetic system. Knorozov realized the fatal flaw in their thinking. Landa was speaking Spanish letters out loud, but the native Maya informant was hearing the corresponding phonetic syllables. When Landa pronounced B, pronounced bay, the Maya informant drew the glyph for the syllable bay. When Landa pronounced L, pronounced ele, the informant drew lu. Knorozov recognized that the Maya script was fundamentally a phonetic syllabary based on consonant-vowel combinations operating under the rules of synharmony. Although Knorozov's work was initially dismissed in the West as communist propaganda due to the geopolitical tensions of the Cold War and the fierce opposition of Eric Thomson, his phonetic model proved utterly undeniable.
By the 1970s and 1980s, a dynamic new generation of scholars, including Linda Shalay, Peter Matthews, Floyd Lounsbury, and a brilliant teenage prodigy named David Stewart, ignited a modern epigraphic revolution. Stewart made the crucial breakthrough of identifying phonetic substitution sets, demonstrating that the Maya utilized multiple wildly different graphical symbols to spell the exact same phonetic syllable. Once these patterns were mapped, the floodgates of decipherment burst wide open. Today, epigraphers can read more than 85 to 90% of all surviving classic Maya hieroglyphic texts with absolute phonetic accuracy. The cracking of the Maya script did not simply provide names for silent monuments, it resurrected the authentic, unfiltered voices of an entire ancient civilization. Through their deciphered texts, the Maya now speak to us in their own words. We read the intimate, agonizing poetry of grief written by kings who lost their royal consorts. We read the battlefield taunts carved onto the steps of captive stairways. We read the names of master sculptors and painters who proudly signed their masterpieces in microscopic glyphs, and we read the sacred, complex rituals performed to maintain cosmic order.
With the ability to read the written words of the ancient Maya firmly unlocked, the physical ruins of their jungle cities ceased to be mysterious, anonymous piles of stone. Instead, they stand revealed as the meticulously planned, intensely symbolic stages upon which this brilliant civilization lived, ruled, and prayed. To truly appreciate how the Maya fused this profound worldview into physical reality, we must turn our attention to their extraordinary structural engineering, the design, construction, and sacred geometry of the monumental pyramids and royal palaces that still pierce the green canopy of the Mesoamerican forest. To emerge from the suffocating tangle of the Central American rainforest into a clearing dominated by an ancient Maya city is to experience an overwhelming sense of architectural scale and sacred theatricality. Massive limestone pyramids rise with razor-sharp geometry through the green canopy, framing colossal paved plazas, sprawling multi-roomed palaces, and towering ceremonial causeways. Yet the profound wonder of Maya architecture lies not merely in its aesthetic majesty, but in the astonishing logistical and engineering reality of its creation. The ancient Maya achieved one of the most prolific and durable monumental building traditions in the ancient world, completely without the aid of wheeled transportation, draft animals such as oxen or horses, or metal tools. Every single block of stone was quarried, shaped, transported, and laid into place entirely through human muscle, stone-on-stone percussion, and brilliant structural engineering. The sheer organizational complexity of Maya construction required an extraordinary command of labor and geological materials. The foundational bedrock of the Maya world was karst limestone, an abundant sedimentary rock that proved to be an ideal construction medium. Working in deep open-air quarries, Maya stonemasons utilized heavy hammerstones made of dense igneous basalt or diorite, paired with durable chert and flint chisels to extract millions of tons of limestone blocks. When first quarried from beneath the moist subsoil, the limestone was relatively soft and pliable, allowing masons to carve intricate decorative facades and smooth ashlar blocks with remarkable ease. Once exposed to the sun and air, the limestone underwent a natural chemical curing process, hardening into durable, weather-resistant stone. To bind these massive stone blocks into monolithic structures, Maya engineers perfected a sophisticated mortar and plaster technology utilizing quicklime. Immense quantities of limestone boulders were crushed and stacked into massive circular wood-burning pyres, which were fired at temperatures exceeding 1600 degrees Fahrenheit for days on end to produce calcium oxide or quicklime.
When slaked with water and mixed with sasgab, a naturally occurring unconsolidated limestone breccia mined from subterranean pits, it formed a durable hydraulic cement and brilliant white stucco plaster. The Maya coated their pyramids, royal palaces, causeways, and entire central plazas in thick layers of this gleaming plaster, finishing them with rich polychrome mineral paints dominated by hematite red, malachite green, and the famous unfading pigment known as Maya blue. However, the manufacturing of this lime plaster carried an immense environmental price. Producing a single ton of green quicklime required up to 5 tons of green timber, meaning that every major building boom directly accelerated regional deforestation and ecological strain. From an engineering perspective, the interior spaces of Maya buildings were defined by the structural mechanics of the corbelled arch, often referred to as the false arch. Unlike the true semicircular arch developed by the Romans, which relies on a central keystone to evenly distribute compressive forces outward and downward, the Maya corbelled vault was constructed by laying successive horizontal courses of stone masonry inward, each tier stepping slightly closer to the center than the one below it, until the two opposing walls were close enough to be bridged across the top by a single capstone slab. Because this cantilever design generates massive downward and lateral gravitational loads, the supporting masonry walls had to be exceptionally thick, resulting in interior rooms that were relatively narrow and canyon-like.
To compensate for the interior limitations of the corbelled vault and to achieve dramatic vertical authority on the exterior, Maya architects crowned the summits of their temples with towering ornate vertical structures known as roof combs or cristeria. Anchored firmly over the thick, weight-bearing rear walls of the summit shrines, these pierced stone roof combs soared dozens of feet into the air, adorned with colossal, brightly painted stucco relief sculptures of gods and deified royal ancestors. Functionally, the roof combs did more than merely magnify the visual height and psychological intimidation of the pyramid. They acted as magnificent acoustic soundboards. When a king or high priest stood on the elevated summit platform beneath the roof comb, the curved masonry and vertical planes focused and projected his voice across hundreds of yards, allowing his sacred chants, declarations of war, and public prayers to resonate clearly across the thousands of commoners gathered in the expansive plazas below. To the ancient Maya, a pyramid was never conceived as an empty geometric monument or a purely utilitarian structure. It was the physical recreation of the sacred geography of the cosmos. In the hieroglyphic script, pyramids were explicitly labeled with the glyph for wits, meaning mountain. In Mesoamerican theology, natural mountains were living, sacred entities that contained within their deep chambers the primordial sources of water, agricultural fertility, and the seeds of life. By constructing a soaring stone pyramid, the Maya were creating an artificial sacred mountain at the center of their urban world. The summit temple atop the pyramid was conceptualized as a chen, a sacred cave piercing the mountain's heart, a mystical threshold connecting the mundane human realm directly to the primordial womb of creation and the supernatural dwelling place of the gods. The layered architectural tiers of these monumental pyramids were loaded with cosmological symbolism, frequently featuring 9 stepped platforms to represent the 9 distinct levels of the underworld, or 13 terraces to embody the 13 celestial realms of the upper heavens. Furthermore, these monumental pyramids functioned as colossal ancestral mausoleums. Rather than raising an older structure to build a new, Maya kings engaged in continuous architectural renewal, constructing massive new pyramid layers directly over the existing temples and tombs of their royal forebears. Like a series of nested Russian dolls, excavating deep inside a classic Maya pyramid often reveals 3, 4, or even 5 earlier fully intact painted temples from previous centuries, preserved forever within the stone womb of the newest mountain. Across different environmental zones of Mesoamerica, Maya architecture diversified into distinct, brilliant regional styles.
In the dense southern forests of the Petén, cities like Tikal perfected a style characterized by dramatic, breathtaking verticality. Tikal's Temple 1, known as the Temple of the Great Jaguar, rises over 150 feet above the Great Plaza, built directly over the rich subterranean burial vault of the great 8th century king Jasau Chan Kawil I. With its nearly vertical terraced slopes, dizzyingly steep staircases, and soaring limestone roof comb, the architecture of Petén was designed to project absolute, crushing imperial authority, dwarfing the human spectator beneath the overwhelming power of the dynastic state. In stark contrast, along the rolling limestone hills of the northern Yucatan Peninsula, the architects of the Puc region developed a completely different, highly refined aesthetic masterpiece. In cities like Uxmal, Kabah, Sayil, and Labna, the Puc style abandoned heavy vertical masses in favor of sweeping, multi-roomed palace complexes with horizontal proportions. Rather than relying on solid load-bearing stone walls, Puc architects filled the structural cores of their buildings with thick, highly durable lime concrete rubble, facing the exterior with thin, precisely cut limestone veneer tiles.
The upper facades of Puc palaces resembled magnificent woven stone tapestries, featuring thousands of individual factory-like stone mosaic pieces, assembled into intricate geometric friezes, stepped frets, lattice patterns, and hundreds of three-dimensional hook-nosed stone masks depicting Chak, the supreme Maya god of rain. Because the Puc Hills possessed neither surface rivers nor natural cenote sinkholes, the inhabitants were entirely dependent on seasonal rainfall. Thus, their architecture transformed into a massive, uninterrupted prayer in stone, covering entire civic facades in the sacred face of the rain deity. Along the western frontier in Chiapas, the architects of Palenque developed an exceptionally delicate, innovative style adapted to their lush mountainous environment. Utilizing hard, fine-grained limestone, Palenque's builders reduced the thickness of their walls, pierced their interior vaults with T-shaped ventilation openings representing the sacred breath of life, and engineered elegant, sloping mansard roofs covered in delicate stucco reliefs. Palenque's royal palace complex features multi-vaulted gallery corridors wrapping around open, sunlit courtyards, crowned by a unique 4-story square observation tower that served as both a celestial observatory and a defensive watchtower overlooking the surrounding coastal plains. Meanwhile, in the central Yucatan regions of Rio Bec and Chenes, architects favored dramatic visual illusion and theatrical horror. In Rio Bec architecture, palaces were flanked by towering, non-functional false pyramid towers that simulated the appearance of Petén temples, complete with impossibly steep, unclimbable decorative staircases and fake solid stone summit doorways. In Chenes architecture, the entire front facade of the temple was transformed into the gaping, terrifying maw of the earth monster. The central entrance of the temple formed the monster's open, fanged mouth, requiring royal priests to physically step over stone teeth and enter the belly of the underworld beast to conduct their sacred communion with ancestral spirits. Yet behind this monumental artistic triumph lay an even more fundamental engineering triumph: large-scale urban water management and environmental hydrology. In the seasonal rainforest of the southern lowlands, where several months of torrential rains gave way to catastrophic seasonal droughts, surviving with populations numbering in the tens of thousands was a matter of life and death. At Tikal, Maya hydraulic engineers transformed the entire city center into a vast paved watershed. Every square foot of plaster paving across the Great Plaza and the surrounding elevated acropolises was subtly sloped to funnel millions of gallons of rainwater through stone-lined aqueducts and sluice gates directly into massive interconnected urban reservoirs. Recent groundbreaking geoarchaeological excavations at Tikal's Corriental Reservoir have revealed a level of public health and water filtration technology that was millennia ahead of its time.
To prevent their drinking water from stagnating or becoming contaminated by toxic cyanobacteria and heavy metals during the dry season, Maya engineers built multi-layered filtration systems directly into the intake conduits of the reservoir. They constructed filtration beds composed of crystalline quartz sand and volcanic zeolite, a natural aluminosilicate mineral known for its extraordinary ion exchange and toxin-absorbing capabilities. This zeolite had to be mined and transported over 80 miles from volcanic deposits in Guatemala, demonstrating that the Maya actively sought out and imported specialized geochemical materials to create pristine, safe municipal water distribution networks for their urban populations.
At the social and ritual heart of every major Maya city lay another indispensable architectural fixture, the monumental masonry ball court. Designed in the shape of a capital letter I, the ball court consisted of a narrow central playing alley flanked by two parallel sloping stone ramps topped by vertical viewing walls and wide end zones. In great centers like Copan, Yaxchilan, and most famously at the colossal Great Ball Court of Chichen Itza, which spans over 540 feet in length, the ball court was constructed with sophisticated acoustic properties, allowing a whisper spoken at one end of the field to carry clearly across the entire arena. The ball game, known historically as Peats, was far more than an athletic competition or elite pastime. It was a deeply sacred, high-stakes theological drama reenacting the cosmic foundation myth recorded in the Popol Vuh. On this court, the primordial hero twins, Hunahpu and Xbalanque, had descended into the underworld of Xibalba to challenge and defeat the arrogant lords of death in a series of supernatural ball games. When Maya lords and elite captives stepped onto the stone playing field, wearing heavy leather yokes, padded knee guards, and hard wooden deflecting gauntlets to strike a heavy, solid rubber ball using only their hips and torsos, they were physically reenacting this celestial struggle between life and death, light and darkness, agricultural rebirth, and eternal annihilation. The architectural stages were thus meticulously prepared across the lowlands, soaring mountain pyramids, acoustic plazas, gleaming plaster highways, and sacred subterranean portals. Yet the true spiritual soul of these stone metropolises was animated by the elaborate, deeply terrifying rituals that took place upon their summits. To maintain the fragile order of the universe, to coax the rain from the skies and ensure the rising of the morning sun, the Maya engaged in an endless sacred covenant with their pantheon of gods, a metaphysical covenant sealed in the most sacred currency known to ancient Mesoamerica, the ritual shedding of divine human blood. To understand the mind of the ancient Maya, one must abandon modern notions of a sterile, mechanistic universe and enter a reality that was completely, vibrantly alive. In the Maya worldview, the cosmos was not a passive stage upon which human history unfolded, but a delicate, breathing, and precarious metabolic engine. Every mountain, tree, river, cave, and celestial body was inhabited by sacred consciousness and charged with supernatural power. Humanity did not stand apart from nature as its master. Rather, humans were active, vital participants in an eternal, reciprocal covenant with the divine. The gods had created humanity for a singular, essential purpose: to nourish, praise, and sustain the universe through ritual, memory, and the perpetual offering of life force. If humanity failed in this sacred duty, the celestial gears would seize, the rains would cease, and the world would slide irreversibly back into primordial darkness. The Maya conceived the architecture of the cosmos as a multi-tiered, tripartite structure aligned along a sacred vertical axis. Above the earth lay the upper heavens, consisting of 13 distinct, stacked celestial layers, each governed by an overarching celestial patron deity. At the center was the terrestrial human world, a flat, quadripartite earth floating on the back of a colossal primordial water lily monster, turtle, or crocodile resting on the surface of the primeval sea.
Beneath the earth, shrouded in subterranean dampness and eternal night, lay Xibalba, the watery, nine-layered underworld of death, decay, and transformation. Piercing through these three distinct planes at the exact center of reality was the axis mundi, embodied by the sacred ceiba tree, known in Maya cosmology as the Yakche. The towering roots of the Yakche plunged deep into the watery depths of Xibalba. Its massive fluted trunk anchored the earthly realm, and its spreading emerald canopy cradled the highest realm of the heavens. In addition to this central pillar, the terrestrial plane was organized around four sacred cardinal directions, each associated with a specific color: tree, bird, wind, and patron deity. Red for the east, the direction of sunrise and rebirth; white for the north, the realm of the ancestors and cold winds; black for the west, the portal of the dying sun and the descent into darkness; yellow for the south, the realm of warmth and midday brilliance; and sacred blue-green at the absolute center of existence. Governing this intricate cosmic framework was an extensive fluid pantheon of polytheistic and pantheistic deities. Rather than possessing fixed, rigid personalities like the gods of Mount Olympus, Maya deities were multifaceted, transformational beings capable of merging, shifting genders, splitting into four cardinal aspects, or aging throughout the day. At the apex of this celestial hierarchy was Itzamnaj, the elderly supreme creator god of wisdom, esoteric knowledge, and the sky. Depicted as an elderly, toothless sage with a prominent hooked nose, Itzamnaj was revered as the divine inventor of writing, the master of medicine, and the primordial patron of all scribes and priests. Beside him reigned Chak, the fearsome and indispensable god of rain, lightning, and agricultural fertility. In a tropical environment marked by violent seasonal extremes and precarious water tables, Chak was perhaps the most universally and passionately placated deity across the Maya world. He was envisioned wielding a glowing stone axe to strike the clouds and summon thunder, his face characterized by a drooping snout-like nose and spiraling fangs that wept life-giving water. Chak operated both as a singular supreme force and a quartet of distinct directional manifestations, each responsible for commanding the specific seasonal winds and storms that could either bless a kingdom with bumper crops of maize or devastate it with howling hurricanes and catastrophic droughts.
The journey of the sun was commanded by Kinich Ahau, the sun-faced lord, who blazed across the 13 heavens by day in the guise of a radiant, incandescent macaw or eagle. Yet the solar drama did not end with dusk. As the sun plunged beneath the western horizon, Kinich Ahau underwent a terrifying nocturnal metamorphosis. He transformed into the night sun, the fearsome jaguar god of the underworld, prowling through the subterranean rivers of Xibalba, battling the skeletal lords of death throughout the night before rising victoriously, reborn once more on the eastern horizon at dawn. Equally vital to royal power was Kawil, the god of lightning, wild elemental energy, and dynastic abundance. Kawil was depicted with an intricately zoomorphic face, a smoking obsidian blade or axe driven through his forehead, and one leg that transformed into a writhing, living serpent. Kawil represented the sudden, transformative flash of divine lightning that cleaved the earth and fertilized the maize seed. To hold the wooden scepter of Kawil was the supreme marker of an Ajau's dynastic legitimacy. It declared that the ruling king possessed the supernatural authority to channel celestial fire directly into agricultural abundance and material prosperity for his kingdom. At the very philosophical and emotional heart of Maya theology stood the tonsured maize god, known in mythological texts as Hun-Hunapu. The maize god was the physical embodiment of the supreme Mesoamerican crop, personifying the eternal agricultural life cycle of death, burial, decay,
germination, and glorious resurrection. Depicted in royal art as the exquisitely beautiful youthful aristocrat with an elongated cranial head resembling a perfect ear of ripened corn, his hair flowing like silk tassels, the maize god was the quintessential culture hero. His tragic descent into the underworld, his decapitation by the lords of death, and his miraculous resurrection through the ingenuity of his twin sons established the foundational blueprint for all human mortality and spiritual rebirth. Complementing these masculine agricultural and martial forces was Ixchel, the multifaceted goddess of the moon, tides, textile weaving, medicine, and human childbirth. In her youthful aspect, she was the beautiful maiden associated with the waxing moon and romantic fertility. In her elder manifestation, known as Chakchel, she was the terrifying, grandmotherly crone who wore a skirt embroidered with crossed bones, sporting a serpent headdress and tipping over celestial water jars to unleash cataclysmic, world-cleansing floods. To ensure that these powerful, volatile deities continued to spin the celestial spheres and supply the rains, the Maya engaged in the profound, sacred economy of blood sacrifice. In Western cultural history, Mesoamerican blood rituals have often been sensationalized and misunderstood as acts of barbaric cruelty. Within authentic Maya theology, however, bloodletting was not an act of wanton violence, but the ultimate expression of thermodynamic and moral reciprocity. The Maya believed that all living things were animated by a divine, immortal spiritual essence known as Chulel. This sacred life force was most intensely concentrated in two places, the human breath and flowing human blood. Because the creator gods had sliced open their own divine flesh and poured their own celestial blood over ground maize paste to create the first true human beings, humanity was born with an unpayable cosmic debt. Blood was the ultimate life-giving substance. To offer it back to the gods was to return a portion of the divine fire that kept the universe alive.
While commoners offered sacrifices of food, incense, quetzal feathers, and domesticated animals, the heaviest, most agonizing ritual burden fell directly upon the royal family. Because the blood of the Kuhul Ajau and his royal queens was believed to be pure, hyper-concentrated chulel, royal auto-sacrifice was the supreme spiritual duty of the ruling aristocracy. On momentous calendar anniversaries, before military campaigns, or during severe ecological crises, kings and queens retreated into the dark, smoke-filled recesses of temple sanctuaries to perform agonizing self-mutilation. The visual record of these harrowing royal rites survives in astonishing, intimate detail on the carved stone lintels of the Usamachan river capital of Yaxchilan. On lintel 24, dated to 709 CE, the royal queen Lady Kabal Shok is depicted kneeling in exquisite woven brocade regalia, methodically pulling a thick rope studded with razor-sharp obsidian blades and thorns directly through a gaping hole pierced in her own tongue. Beside her, her husband, King Itzamnach Balam II, stands holding a towering ceremonial torch, illuminating the sacred blood dripping from her queen's tongue into a woven basket lined with sheets of wild fig bark paper. Kings performed equally grueling acts of auto-sacrifice, piercing their own foreskins and earlobes with serrated stingray spines, polished jade lancets, and needle-sharp bone perforators. The resulting pool of royal blood, absorbed into the bark paper sheets, was then placed inside ornately carved ceramic braziers and set ablaze alongside fragrant lumps of palm, a sacred copal tree resin. As the sweet, pungent white smoke billowed into the dark vault of the temple, it created a shimmering, fragrant portal between dimensions. Through the combination of severe physical shock, blood loss, prolonged ritual fasting, and the inhalation of psychoactive incense, the royal practitioners entered deep, altered states of trance.
from the twisting coils of the copal smoke, as illustrated on Yaxchilan lintel 25, there manifested the terrifying Oak Chan, the vision serpent. From the gaping, otherworldly jaws of this two-headed spiritual serpent emerged the physical apparition of a deified ancestor or founding warrior king, delivering prophecies, military strategies, and divine reassurance directly to the kneeling royal supplicant. Alongside royal auto-sacrifice stood the ritual practice of human sacrifice, an institution intimately connected to warfare, cosmic renewal, and the placation of catastrophic natural phenomena. Unlike the later Aztec Empire, which conducted mass sacrifices involving tens of thousands of victims to maintain vast imperial terror, classic Maya human sacrifice was typically much smaller in scale, highly selective, and deeply focused on elite captives. The primary candidates for sacrifice were captured enemy kings, princes, and high-ranking generals. To capture an opposing sovereign in battle was the ultimate achievement for an Ajau. The captive was stripped of his royal jewels, displayed in public ceremonies of degradation, and ultimately sacrificed through decapitation, heart excision, or ritual combat on the ball court. Decapitation was specifically symbolic, viewed as the ritual mimicry of harvesting a ripe ear of corn, directly reenacting the mythological decapitation of the maize god in the underworld. Heart extraction, known as nak, was performed by specialized sacrificial priests called nakomob. The victim was stretched backward over a curved stone sacrificial altar atop a pyramid, their limbs held fast by 4 assistants representing the directional chocks. With a single expert slice of a crescent-shaped flint blade between the ribs, the priest reached into the chest cavity, tearing out the still-beating heart and presenting its steaming life force to the statue of the deity before casting the corpse down the steep temple staircase.
In the northern lowlands, where vast natural sinkholes pierced the limestone crust, human offerings were delivered into the watery realm of the underworld through the sacred cenote of Chichen Itza. Deep dredging and underwater excavations of this massive emerald sinkhole had recovered the skeletal remains of men, women, and children, alongside thousands of priceless gold discs, carved jade ornaments, imported bells, and wooden idols. These victims were not cast into the water as punishment. They were dispatched as sacred emissaries directly into the aquatic court of the rain god Chuck, charged with carrying the desperate prayers of the living down into the subterranean womb of the earth. For the ordinary Maya individual, the transition of death was a journey fraught with peril and cosmic horror. When a mortal drew their last breath, their physical body was buried beneath the plaster floor of their family home or within an ancestral tomb, a precious bead of green jade placed inside their mouth to capture and preserve their escaping soul essence. The departed soul was immediately cast into the terrifying trials of Xibalba, the place of fear, an underground metropolis ruled by the 12 cruel lords of death, spearheaded by the dread monarchs Hun Came and Vukub Came. To reach the realm of the ancestors, the soul had to traverse a nightmarish landscape, wading through rivers of boiling blood and putrid pus, navigating labyrinths of stinging thorns, and surviving the 6 deadly test houses of the underworld. The soul had to endure the dark house of absolute blackness, the razor house filled with self-moving obsidian blades, the cold house of howling, freezing winds, the jaguar house stalking with ravenous underworld beasts, the fire house of roaring flames, and the terrifying bat house ruled by Kamazats, the monstrous decapitating bat of death. Yet, like the hero twins and the resurrected maize god before them, the soul that successfully navigated these trials through piety, ancestral guidance, and proper funerary offerings was not condemned to eternal damnation.
The soul emerged triumphant from the depths of Xibalba, transcending the underworld to be reborn as a shimmering ancestral star in the night sky, forever showering blessings, fertility, and rain upon their living descendants who continued to remember and speak their names. For more than a millennium, this magnificent, terrifying religious vision bound millions of Maya people into a cohesive, extraordinarily productive civilization. It inspired the carving of the world's most intricate glyphic texts, the construction of the America's grandest stone cities, and the calculation of deep cosmic time. Yet as the 8th century CE began to unfold, the delicate ecological, military, and political balance that sustained this grand cosmos began to show fatal systemic fractures. The reigns began to fail, the dynastic wars escalated from theatrical raids into existential annihilation, and the holy lords who promised cosmic balance found themselves helpless before a cascading civilizational crisis that would bring the classic Maya world crashing down.
By the late 8th century and the dawn of the 9th century of the Common Era, the brilliant, glittering world of the classic Maya began to experience a profound and terrifying structural unraveling. For over 600 years, the great lowland city-states had expanded exponentially, pushing their demographic boundaries to absolute ecological limits. Populations in urban centers like Tikal, Calakmul, Copan, and Palenque soared to unprecedented densities, placing an unbearable strain on the surrounding tropical rainforest. To feed tens of thousands of urban residents, farmers cleared vast tracts of native canopy to create intensive agricultural fields, inadvertently triggering severe, irreversible environmental consequences. The intensive burning of limestone to manufacture millions of square yards of white stucco plaster required millions of green trees, accelerating deforestation and destabilizing the fragile topsoil across upland slopes. As ancient sediment cores extracted from deep Belizean caves and sediment layers across the Caribbean basin have confirmed that the Maya lowlands were struck by a series of prolonged, devastating multi-year droughts between 800 and 900 of the Common Era. These were not normal seasonal dry spells, but some of the most severe multi-decade drought intervals experienced in Central America in over 7,000 years. As annual rainfall plummeted, urban reservoirs dried up to cracked mud, agricultural yields collapsed, and famine swept rapidly across the dense metropolitan centers. Yet the crisis was not purely environmental, it was profoundly political and ideological. For centuries, the entire legitimacy of the divine king, the Kul Ahau, had rested on his absolute supernatural ability to intercede with the gods, command the rains, and guarantee agricultural abundance. When year after year of severe drought failed to yield a single drop of rain, despite frantic, non-stop bloodletting and human sacrifices, the foundational social contract between the royal court and the commoner population shattered completely. As divine authority fractured, the geopolitical landscape of the Maya world descended into unprecedented existential carnage. Warfare among the independent city-states mutated from ritualized, limited skirmishes aimed at capturing elite royal prisoners into desperate total wars of survival and territorial annihilation. Rather than fighting to capture lords for ransom or sacrifice, starving armies fought to burn rival maize fields, slaughter civilian populations, and destroy entire urban centers. Monumental stone stelae recording proud dynastic lineages abruptly stopped across the southern lowlands, replaced by hastily constructed defensive fortifications, barricaded walls, and panic-driven ditches dug around palace compounds. Cities turned inward, tearing themselves apart in bloody civil wars, social revolutions, and peasant uprisings against the ruling elites.
Within the span of a few generations, this deadly convergence of severe megadroughts, catastrophic deforestation, overpopulation, and runaway warfare triggered the famous classic Maya collapse. One by one, the great rainforest metropolises of the southern lowlands were abandoned to the advancing jungle.
Palaces were left half-finished, royal tombs were sealed for the last time, and fields, causeways, and towering pyramids were swallowed by the voracious roots of the tropical forest. Millions of desperate survivors packed their belongings and fled their ancestral homes, migrating in massive waves away from the stricken southern heartland. Some perished from famine and emerging parasitic diseases, while others undertook epic journeys north toward the arid limestone plains of the Yucatan Peninsula, or west toward the coastal river valleys of Tabasco, carrying with them the flickering embers of their ancient astronomical, mathematical, and literary traditions. Yet, contrary to popular 19th-century myths that the entire Maya race vanished into thin air, the collapse of the classic southern lowlands did not mean the extinction of the Maya people. Instead, it marked a dramatic geographical and political relocation toward the north. While the great southern jungles of Petén fell silent, a brilliant northern renaissance blossomed across the Yucatan Peninsula, where resilient survivors adapted to the harsh, riverless landscape by centering their civilizations around deep natural sinkholes called cenotes. In this post-classic era, northern megacities such as Chichen Itza, Mayapan, and Tulum rose to unprecedented prominence, forging expansive maritime trading networks that stretched in massive dugout canoes from the Gulf of Mexico all the way down to Honduras, distributing obsidian, salt, turquoise, and copper across the entire Mesoamerican world.
With the catastrophic collapse of the great southern rainforest kingdoms, the center of gravity of the Maya world shifted decisively northward to the dry limestone scrub plains of the Yucatan Peninsula and south into the misty volcanic highlands of Guatemala. The post-classic era was marked by a fundamental transformation in Maya political ideology, military strategy, and economic organization. The era of isolated, autocratic divine kings erecting colossal stone portraits of themselves deep in the Petén jungle had passed. In its place arose a pragmatic, highly commercialized, and cosmopolitan civilization that integrated diverse Mesoamerican cultural currents, establishing bustling international maritime trade ports and expansive urban confederations that reshaped the geopolitics of the Americas. At the epicenter of this northern renaissance stood the magnificent metropolis of Chichen Itza. Between the 9th and 12th centuries of the Common Era, Chichen Itza grew into the most dominant and culturally innovative superpower in all of Mesoamerica. What made the city extraordinary was its breathtaking architectural and religious synthesis, which seamlessly fused traditional Maya aesthetic traditions with the militaristic eagle and jaguar warrior iconography characteristic of the Toltec civilization of central Mexico. Throughout the city, the image of Kukulkan, the Yucatec Maya manifestation of the feathered serpent god Quetzalcoatl, was sculpted across temple balustrades, columns, and monumental facades. Surrounding the towering pyramid of El Castillo, master builders constructed massive open-air architectural complexes designed for immense public congregations. The Temple of the Warriors stood framed by the forest-like colonnade of the 1,000 columns, creating vast, covered hypostyle halls unlike anything seen in the classic southern lowlands. Beside these grand halls lay the monumental platform of the skulls, known in Nahuatl as the Tzompantli, where the severed heads of sacrificed enemies were displayed on long wooden stakes, and reclining stone statues known as chacmols, designed to hold human heart offerings in stone bowls carved into their bellies.
Whether this profound central Mexican influence was the result of a direct Toltec military invasion from the distant highland capital of Tula, or the organic product of an expansive, multi-ethnic commercial and ideological alliance, Chichen Itza established a pan-Mesoamerican aesthetic that united diverse linguistic groups under the banner of the feathered serpent cult. Equally revolutionary was the political restructuring that accompanied Chichen Itza's rise. Moving away from the absolute dynastic autocracy of the classic Cuhul-Agua, the rulers of Chichen Itza instituted a corporate system of joint governance known as multipal. Under the multipal model, executive authority was distributed among a council of high nobles, military commanders, and high priests, representing the city's leading aristocratic lineages. This shared administrative framework reduced the catastrophic political instability caused by individual dynastic succession crises and allowed the state to manage vast commercial and military operations across thousands of square miles with unprecedented efficiency. By the 13th century, however, internal political tensions and shifting trade dynamics brought about the violent fall of Chichen Itza, paving the way for the rise of a new northern capital, Mayapan. Located further to the west in the modern Mexican state of Yucatan, Mayapan was established as the heavily fortified administrative center of the League of Mayapan, a powerful confederation that unified the northern peninsula under a single governing council. Unlike the open ceremonial expanse of Chichen Itza, Mayapan was a densely packed defensive fortress enclosed by an unbroken 5-mile-long stone defensive wall, perforated by narrow, easily guarded gates.
Within this walled citadel, more than 15,000 people lived closely crowded around miniature architectural replicas of Chichen Itza's famous monuments. The ruling council at Mayapan maintained tight control over the peninsula by requiring the provincial lords of subordinate Maya cities to reside permanently within the walls of the capital as political hostages. Yet this forced political unity could not withstand deep dynastic rivalries. In the mid-15th century, a bitter civil war erupted between the two most powerful aristocratic families, the Kokom lineage and the Shu dynasty. The Shu faction launched a devastating surprise attack that resulted in the slaughter of the Kokom royal family and the total destruction of Mayatan. The fall of Mayapan shattered the political unity of the northern lowlands, fracturing the Yucatan into 16 fiercely independent, feuding regional provinces known as Cuchcabalub. While the inland plains were consumed by territorial rivalries, the coastal margins of the Maya world experienced a dynamic commercial boom powered by the Putun Maya, an elite seafaring merchant culture often referred to by historians as the Phoenicians of Mesoamerica. Operating from base ports along the Gulf Coast of Tabasco, the Platoon navigators piloted massive 50-foot wooden dugout canoes capable of carrying dozens of rowers and tons of valuable cargo. These intrepid maritime traders navigated the treacherous circumpeninsular coastal waters, connecting trade routes from central Mexico all the way down the Caribbean coastline to the Gulf of Honduras. Along this lucrative Caribbean trade corridor rose stunning coastal fortresses, most famously the cliffside city of Tulum. Perched atop 40-foot limestone bluffs overlooking the crashing turquoise waves of the Caribbean Sea, Tulum was protected by monumental stone walls on 3 sides and an impenetrable ocean precipice on the 4th. The city served as a primary maritime port and customs station for the inland regional capitals, channeling immense quantities of salt, cotton mantles, cacao, dried stingray spines, and raw jade. Off the eastern coast of the peninsula lay the sacred island of Cozumel, which transformed into a major international pilgrimage sanctuary dedicated to Ixchel, the goddess of the moon and fertility, where women from across Mesoamerica traveled by canoe to offer prayers and secure blessings for childbirth.
Simultaneously, in the rugged volcanic highlands of southern Guatemala, a completely separate theater of post-classic Maya civilization was flourishing. Here, amidst deep mountain ravines and pine-clad peaks, the Quiché Maya established an expansive, militarized empire centered upon their formidable hilltop capital of Cumarcaj, also known as Utatlan. The Quiché lords were fierce conquerors who subjugated neighboring highland groups through aggressive warfare, extracting tribute and constructing heavily fortified citadel settlements on narrow, defensible mountain ridges. It was within this highland Quiché kingdom that Maya scribes preserved their most profound literary and mythological masterwork, the Popol Vuh, an epic theological chronicle that recorded the mythic creation of the universe, the heroic subterranean trials of the hero twins, and the divine genealogy of the royal highland dynasties. Yet the highland world was deeply fractured. The Kaqchikel Maya, once loyal military allies of the Quiché, broke away to establish their own independent mountain capital at Iximché, sparking decades of bloody intertribal mountain warfare that would ultimately leave both nations fatally vulnerable to foreign conquest. The dawn of the 16th century brought an unprecedented and apocalyptic disruption to the indigenous world of Americas. The initial contact between the Maya and the Spanish Empire occurred by pure accident in the year 1511, when a Spanish caravel sailing from Panama to Santo Domingo struck a coral reef in the Caribbean and sank. A small group of survivors drifted in an open lifeboat for 2 weeks before washing ashore on the eastern coast of the Yucatan Peninsula, where they were immediately captured by the local Maya. Most of the shipwrecked sailors perished from disease or were sacrificed in religious ceremonies, but 2 men survived to alter the course of Mesoamerican history in wildly divergent ways: Jerónimo de Aguilar and Gonzalo Guerrero. Jerónimo de Aguilar remained an enslaved captive for 8 years, preserving his Christian identity and secretly reading his Catholic prayer book until he was dramatically rescued in 1519 by the Spanish expedition led by Hernán Cortés. Aguilar became an invaluable linguistic asset, translating the spoken Yucatec Maya language into Spanish, while the enslaved noblewoman Malintzin, or La Malinche, translated Maya into Nahuatl, allowing Cortés to communicate with the Aztec Empire and ultimately orchestrate the fall of Tenochtitlan. In sharp and fascinating contrast, Gonzalo Guerrero embraced his new reality and underwent complete cultural assimilation. He was accepted into the elite military society of the Maya city of Chetumal, earned the respect of the local king through his martial prowess, had his face and body ritually tattooed and pierced, and married a high-ranking Maya noblewoman named Sacil Ha. Together, they had children who were celebrated in Mexican history as the very first mestizos, the first documented children born of mixed European and indigenous American heritage. When Spanish forces arrived to conquer the region, Guerrero adamantly refused to return to the Christian world, instead serving as Maya war captain, who organized Maya naval defenses and trained Maya warriors in anti-Spanish tactics, dying in battle against his former countrymen while defending his adopted Maya homeland. Following the swift and dramatic fall of the Aztec Empire in 1521, the Spanish crown turned its imperial ambitions toward the Maya territories. The Spanish conquerors assumed that conquering the Maya would be as rapid and straightforward as their campaign against the Aztecs. Capture the central emperor, the entire civilization would capitulate. They could not have been more fundamentally mistaken. The conquest of the Maya world proved to be one of the longest, bloodiest, and most grueling colonial campaigns in the history of the Spanish Empire. Because the Maya were fractured into dozens of fiercely autonomous city-states and independent regional kingdoms, there was no single emperor to capture and no central imperial capital to destroy. Every single province, valley, and walled fortress had to be fought for, negotiated with, and subdued individually. In the north, the conquest of Yucatan was entrusted to Francisco de Montejo the Elder and his son, Francisco de Montejo the Jr. Beginning in 1527, the Montejos launched multiple massive invasions into the peninsula, only to be repeatedly repelled, surrounded, and driven back to the sea by resilient Maya warriors. In the waterless limestone scrub and oppressive tropical heat of the northern bush, Spanish cavalry was rendered largely useless, and European metal armor became an agonizing furnace. Maya fighters utilized brilliant guerrilla tactics, poisoning waterholes, constructing camouflaged spike pits to impale Spanish horses, staging nocturnal ambushes, and melting into the dense jungle whenever faced with concentrated artillery. It took nearly 20 years of relentless, brutal warfare, devastating smallpox epidemics, and cynical political manipulation of the historic feud between the Xiu and Kokam families before the Spanish were finally able to establish basic colonial control over the northern plains in 1546.
Meanwhile, in the southern highlands of Guatemala, the conquest took on an even more savage, apocalyptic character. In 1524, Hernán Cortés dispatched his most ruthless lieutenant, the notoriously cruel Pedro de Alvarado, to subjugate the highland kingdoms. Alvarado marched into the mountains at the head of hundreds of Spanish cavalry and thousands of native allied warriors from central Mexico. In a climactic and legendary clash on the plains of Quetzaltenango, the Quiche armies, led by their heroic war leader Tecún Umán, were decisively broken by Spanish cavalry charges. To crush any remaining indigenous resistance, Alvarado invited the royal lords of Cumarcaj to a peace council, where he had them immediately seized, chained, and burned alive over open fires before burning their entire capital city to the ground. Exploiting the deep-seated ethnic hatred between highland rivals, Alvarado initially allied with the Kaqchikel of Iximché to suppress the Quiche, only to turn upon the Kaqchikel with extortionate demands for gold, sparking years of desperate mountain rebellions that were crushed with unyielding ferocity. Yet, as Spanish colonial cities, cathedrals, and sugar plantations were erected across the northern plains of Yucatan and the valleys of Guatemala, one final stubborn bastion of authentic, unconquered Maya sovereignty remained entirely free. Deep within the impenetrable mosquito-infested jungles of the southern Petén Basin, the very cradle where the ancient classic Maya had built their earliest megacities, lay Lake Petén Itzá. On an island in the middle of this vast lake stood the city of Noj Petén, also known as Tayasal, the capital of the resilient Itzá Maya. For nearly 2 centuries after the landfall of Christopher Columbus, as the Spanish Empire conquered and mapped the Americas from California to the tip of Argentina, Noj Petén remained a completely sovereign, independent Maya kingdom. Within its whitewashed stone temples, Itzá priests continued to read their ancient hieroglyphic codices, track the sacred long count cycles, and sacrifice to their ancient gods, completely untouched by European political rule. The Itzá kings repeatedly rebuffed Spanish missionary expeditions sent into the deep forest. It was not until March 13, 1697, more than a century and a half after the conquest of the rest of Mexico, that a massive coordinated amphibious military expedition, spearheaded by the Spanish governor of Yucatan, Martín de Ursúa, launched an armada of armed galleys across Lake Petén Itzá. With artillery roaring across the water, the Spanish breached the island fortifications, tearing down the last standing stone temples and crushing the very last independent Maya kingdom in the Americas.
The fall of Tenochtitlan marked the definitive end of pre-Columbian political independence for the Maya world. Yet, the story of the Maya does not end with the sword of the conquistador or the fires of the colonial inquisitor. The ancient stone cities may have fallen silent beneath the advancing green jungle, but the blood, the language, the cosmology, and the extraordinary spirit of this incomparable civilization refused to be erased from the tapestry of human history.
With the fall of the last independent kingdoms and the formal establishment of the Spanish colonial order, the vast urban centers of the Maya world were fully abandoned to the relentless embrace of the tropical wilderness. Roots of towering ceiba trees split open limestone plazas, strangler figs tore through corbelled vaults, and thick green moss swallowed the carved faces of deified kings. To the outside world, it appeared as though a once brilliant civilization had simply vanished into thin air, leaving behind only silent, haunted ruins buried beneath an impenetrable sea of green. Yet the pervasive myth that the Maya people mysteriously disappeared is perhaps the greatest and most enduring misconception in all of historical anthropology. The Maya never vanished. They adapted, resisted, and endured, preserving their identity through centuries of colonial subjugation, forced labor, and systematic cultural erasure. Throughout the colonial era and into the modern epoch, the Maya demonstrated an astonishing capacity for cultural resilience and spiritual syncretism. Stripped of their monumental public temples and forbidden under pain of death from practicing their ancient religion, indigenous communities did not abandon their ancestral gods. Instead, they ingeniously wove them into the fabric of the newly imposed Catholic faith. The ancient rain god Chak was venerated through the imagery of St. John the Baptist or St. Michael the Archangel. The maize god found symbolic resonance with the resurrected Christ, and the sacred moon and fertility goddess Ixchel merged with the Virgin Mary. Beneath the whitewashed facades of Spanish colonial parish churches, traditional daykeepers continued to quietly count the sacred days of the ancient 260-day Tzolk'in calendar, offering copal incense and pouring libations of fermented maize liquor to ensure the fertility of the earth. This resilience was not merely spiritual, it was fiercely martial. In the mid-19th century, simmering indigenous fury over centuries of land theft, racial subjugation, and debt peonage erupted into the ferocious caste war of Yucatan. In 1847, the Maya of the eastern and southern peninsula rose up in a massive, coordinated armed rebellion against the Euro-Mexican ruling elite, nearly driving the Hispanic population entirely off the peninsula. In the dense, uncharted forests of Quintana Roo, rebel Maya established an independent, unconquered sovereign state centered around the sacred shrine of Chan Santa Cruz. Guided by the prophetic movement of the Talking Cross, this indigenous rebel nation held off Mexican and British military forces for over half a century, maintaining de facto independence until the dawn of the 20th century. Today, more than 7 million Maya people live throughout their ancestral homelands in Guatemala, southern Mexico, Belize, and Honduras, as well as in vibrant diaspora communities across North America. Far from being museum relics or forgotten ghosts of antiquity, the contemporary Maya represent a dynamic, living culture. More than 30 distinct Mayan languages, including Yucatec, Quiche, Cocchil, Mam, Xekchi, and Tzotzil, continue to be spoken fluently by millions of people. Maya women still weave intricate, dazzlingly colorful textiles using traditional backstrap looms, encoding ancient cosmological patterns, sacred flora, and ancestral identities directly into the geometric threads of their clothing. In the misty highlands of Guatemala, contemporary daykeepers still climb sacred mountain peaks to perform centuries-old fire rituals, speaking prayers in ancient tongues to sustain the delicate metaphysical balance of the universe.
Simultaneously, the modern world has entered a thrilling, revolutionary new golden age of Maya archaeology. For over a century, our understanding of this ancient civilization was limited to what intrepid explorers like John Lloyd Stevens and artist Frederick Catherwood could hack out of the jungle with machetes in the 19th century, or what archaeological teams could painstakingly excavate over decades of grueling field labor. Early 20th century scholars concluded that the Maya were a relatively sparse population of peaceful forest dwellers organized around modest ceremonial centers. In the 21st century, that entire historical model has been utterly revolutionized by the power of cutting-edge technology, most notably airborne LiDAR, which stands for light detection and ranging. By mounting specialized laser scanners onto airplanes and shooting billions of infrared light pulses down through the dense forest canopy, scientists can digitally strip away the jungle foliage in real time, revealing the breathtaking, unfiltered topography of the ancient landscape below. The results of these extensive LiDAR surveys have astonished the international scientific community and rewritten world history books. Deep beneath the supposedly virgin forests of the Petén Basin and the Campeche lowlands, LiDAR has revealed that ancient Maya cities were vastly larger, more interconnected, and far more heavily populated than anyone had ever dared to dream. Archaeologists have identified tens of thousands of previously undiscovered structures, towering pyramids, sprawling palaces, fortified hilltop fortresses, and thousands of miles of elevated limestone causeways connecting distant city-states across vast expanses of swamp. LiDAR mapping has exposed colossal systems of terraced hillsides, sophisticated drainage canals, and millions of square acres of intensively managed agricultural wetlands, proving that the Maya lowlands sustained a thriving, hyper-dense population of 10 to 15 million people at their classic peak. This was not a modest collection of isolated forest temples, but an interconnected, continent-spanning civilization whose urban scale, environmental engineering, and administrative complexity rivaled imperial Rome and ancient Han Dynasty China. When we step back and survey the sweeping arc of Maya civilization, from its deep pre-classic foundations in the shadows of the Olmecs to its classic golden age and enduring modern legacy, we are confronted with one of the absolute pinnacles of human ingenuity. In complete isolation from the intellectual currents of Europe and Asia, the Maya independently mastered the eternal mysteries of the universe. They looked up into the velvet blackness of the tropical night and charted the complex choreography of the stars without telescopes. They conceptualized the mathematical infinity of zero and constructed a calendar capable of measuring deep time across billions of years. They invented a brilliant, expressive phonetic writing system to record the triumphs and heartbreaks of their kings, and they raised artificial stone mountains through the jungle canopy that still stand as timeless monuments to the power of human ambition. The stone cities of the Maya may have been reclaimed by the earth, but the intellectual legacy of their civilization remains immortal. Their monumental architecture stands as a profound testament to what human beings can achieve through collective vision, structural mastery, and an unshakable reverence for the natural and cosmic forces that govern our existence. The ancient Maya looked upon the passing of days not with fear, but with awe, understanding that human history is merely a sacred thread woven into the vast, eternal fabric of the universe. As modern science continues to peel back the jungle canopy, the voices of the ancient Maya emerge from the silence of centuries, reminding us that though empires rise and fall, the enduring quest for truth, beauty, and celestial understanding is written forever into the stars.